Hey guys, welcome back to That's Mental with myself, Isabel Bartak-Healy. Today we have Tim Marron on. He is a sports psychologist consultant and I have 1,000,001 questions that I want to ask him, so let's get into it. So Tim, before we get started and we talk about the world of sports psychology, how did you get into this? Because you mentioned to me that you were a rugby player and I suppose you had your own sports psychology moment when you got an injury. So how did all of that come about for you, and how did you, I suppose, overcome that?
Yeah, I suppose sport has always been a massive part of my life. Since I was younger, I'd always have a ball at my feet or a ball in my hands, whatever it was. I'd always watch any sport, play any sport. So that's probably where the interest arose from initially. I remember as well, rugby would have been my main sport. So I was playing with Crosshaven at the time. I remember one season, I think we were under 16s, we kept losing matches by like a few points. I was getting really frustrated by it and I was trying to figure out, why is this happening? And at the time I was starting to read a bit more about sports journalism, things like that. And I started hearing about sports psychology. Just the idea of it was mentioned a little bit more. And that's where the initial interest arose from, I suppose. And then went on to study psychology at UCC and then sports psychology in University of Limerick. But I suppose at the same time I was also going through my own issues in sport too. So I suppose we had a research or a lecturer in college. He always used to say, research is me search. So what he meant by that is we're often drawn to things that are relevant to ourselves.
Yes,
you know? So lots of things we would have studied in college, you know, like dealing with injuries, dealing with like confidence, what else? Things like athletic identity would have all been things that were really relevant to me. So I was applying them to myself at the same time, which is very interesting. And then
you were your own case study.
Exactly, yeah. yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, then I had to give up rugby, unfortunately, because of injury. So that made me apply all that stuff even more, you know what I mean? So it was tough, but it was a good opportunity to apply the stuff that I'd learned in college, you know?
Yeah. And just dialing in on that, I mean, can you take me back to that? Like, how old were you when that happened? Like, were you in your 20s, and did you really think, Jesus, this is the end of the line for me? Like, was it really devastating to you?
It was. Yeah, it was. Like, I was, you know, I probably had aspirations to be a professional rugby player, never made it that far, but I was 23 when it happened, so it was a concussion. And you kind of almost go through a stage, it sounds silly, but you go through a form of grief almost, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like I was in denial at first that this could be happening, that, you know, rugby was everything to me. I talk about athletic identity a lot now with the people that I work with, you know, the fact that, you know, your sport is everything that you are, you know. And thankfully a lot of players are better educated in that now, looking at sport as part of who they are. I suppose this whole thing for me made me battle that myself, think about, you know, is there more to me than sport? Is it all of who I am? So it really tested me in that way, I suppose. I was 23 when it happened and kind of in denial for a year, to be honest with you, hoping to play on, hoping that I'd be okay again. But eventually you kind of come to a stage of acceptance, I guess, really. You know?
After the anger and the sadness.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. You go through all the stages.
Yeah. And so do you think that, I suppose with particular sports, and I have rugby in my head now again, you know, the retirement age for people is so young when it comes to a lot of sports. Do you think that plays on the mind a bit as well? Like, as in, like, again, just you saying 23 when you had that injury and it was over for you. Is that something that you think is in a lot of people's heads? You know what I mean? I'm 23 now, I'm 24 now. Is it time for me to retire? You know, what's the next thing? If I haven't made it to a certain standpoint where I wanted to be in my career right now, how much time, like there's a time limit for them, you know, on the clock, like.
Yeah.
Does that come into it a lot?
Sometimes I would say so. Almost the opposite comes into it sometimes as well, though, where you're not really considering another option. So, you know, you look at, say, with rugby now, like schools players who might have aspirations of becoming professional rugby players, you know, a lot of the time in their mind it's, you know, I'm going to be a rugby player and that's it. That's all I want, you know. So I think it's really important, and in rugby they've done quite well with this over the last 5 to 10 years, I suppose, educating young players on making sure that you have something else, you know. And it's not just a safety thing either, just in case it doesn't work out. Like, it actually has performance benefits as well, which sounds mad. Actually having more than just your sport can help you cope with things going badly. So, you know, if you have an injury, if you get dropped, if you have a bad game, instead of it being all of who you are, you've got other things to go to. You know?
Absolutely.
You'd even see it in professional players in different sports now. Like they might have a separate business that they're running. They might have a separate passion. You look at Peter O'Mahony, he's obsessed with his garden and his grass and all that. You know what I mean? So for players these days, it's not just about what you do on the pitch.
Yes.
It's about everything else as well, you know, and having other passions can be very helpful for you to allow you to perform on the pitch as well.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I would look at that from any perspective, in the sense that, like, if you dial in on your job too much, it can become a negative. If that's all you're thinking about morning, noon and night, if you're overtraining, if you're overplaying, and if you don't have like a personal life or other hobbies outside of that, I think it can be a pretty slippery slope for you. I know I mentioned this to you when we were chatting on the phone before you came in for the podcast, but I was saying to you that I suppose my area of sport and training is, like, I would have done CrossFit for a number of years. So I would have watched the CrossFit Games. And one athlete in particular to me that I thought was an amazing example of sports psychology and the power of it is Tia Claire Toomey. Now, she has been the fittest woman on the earth for a number of years, went away, popped out a baby, came back even stronger. Like, she's a machine. She's amazing. Yeah. But I remember watching her years ago, and I think she came third one year, and someone said to her afterwards, "Oh, you did a great job." And she said, "Oh, thanks. Like, it was okay, you know." And like, third is nothing to be frowned upon. Like, I mean, when you look at the incredible athletes that are involved in the CrossFit Games and everything else, but it was as if she was just, her mind was holding her back on getting to where she needed to be. And then I think it was a year or two later where she just took off. And I would have loved to know what she did with her mind to get her to that place. That's obviously something you're working with a number of athletes.
Yeah. I suppose something that I come across a lot would be players or athletes who are technically very talented, tactically very talented, physically very talented, but sometimes they're lacking the mental capabilities, and that's maybe where they're, you know, not hitting the goals that they've set out for themselves, not achieving maybe their potential, what they think they can achieve. So it can often get in the way, I suppose. I suppose anyone I work with, I frame it to them as, you know, psychology is going to affect your performance, whether you like it or not.
Yes.
Right. So how you think affects how you perform. You know, there's so much research out there on the effect of confidence, motivation, concentration, all these different things, right? So the way I put it is that it's going to affect performance, but you can either use that to your advantage or fall victim to it.
Yes.
You know, so a lot of people, it's their weakness and it might be the reason that they don't perform to the best of their ability. So anyone who I work with, I try to help them take advantage of that fact, of the fact that it's going to affect your performance. So there's lots of different ways that we can do that. So there'll be different mental skills that I would teach athletes that I work with. So things like self-talk, for example, like throughout a performance, no matter what sport you're playing, what are you saying to yourself, right? So you've got to make sure that those are really helpful messages. You know, it's almost like having a teammate, but it's in your own mind, right? So it's something within your control, so you can control, you know, those messages that are coming through. Visualization would be another skill that I would teach people. So using your imagination, basically. So for somebody in something like CrossFit now, or even weightlifting yourself, you know, where there's maybe the training environment is different to the competition environment.
Yes. Yeah.
You've maybe got loads of more people watching you. There's, as you said, with the weightlifting, there's almost silence straight away, whereas maybe you're used to training in a gym where there's noise, other people are going on. Like, psychologically, that's difficult to prepare for, right? And if you're waiting on competition to prepare yourself for that, you're kind of just leaving it to chance, you know. So visualization allows you to get that mental rehearsal in, basically. So you're actually picturing yourself in that environment, seeing the noise or the silence or the people around you, and seeing how you want to perform, seeing how you want to think in that moment. So we'll often leave those things to chance, right? But what I try to help people do is prepare themselves for those moments of pressure, I Probably gone way off the topic
No,
of the question.
I'm so intrigued. I'm so intrigued because you mentioned it there, and again, it was something we were chatting about. And I was saying to Tim, just for those that are listening, and they're kind of like, "What did you mean about the CrossFit weightlifting?" So, like, I was saying to Tim that when I did CrossFit, so like that's burpees, box jumps, like your Olympic lifting or whatever. But when you're doing a competition in that format, and I have done them previously years ago, like, there's so many people running at the same time. There's so many people doing double unders at the same time. So no one's really paying too much attention to you, you know, like they can, but like they can't hear you breathe. They can't hear you. When you're doing a weightlifting competition, which I just did my first one last month, you are on a stage and it goes dead silent. Like, because they want to hear everything. They want to see everything. It's a completely different atmosphere. And obviously, like, I've worked in radio for over 10 years. I mean, Jesus, if I had problems with my confidence, I need to know about them now, like, because so far so good. But like, it was such a strange new environment to come into where like literally people can hear you breathing. But I loved watching athletes and because they all had different techniques of how to cope with that. So some people, like even one of the lads in the gym, like he actually was talking to himself as he was about to pick up the bar. He was saying, it's just a bit of fun. Yeah. You know, instead of overthinking it. You know, some people make loud noises, it helps them, but it's intriguing to find what works for you. But what you said there was so interesting because like visualizing, you know, you're there, you're in the moment, I imagine can be so helpful. Yeah. And I suppose just coming back to the confidence element of it, would you ever advise someone to kind of like fake it until you make it, in the sense of like, you know, do you know how they say, if you want to be a millionaire or whatever, you know, visualize yourself at that level. Yeah. I know that's like a kind of wide analogy now, but like, do you say that to people? Like, imagine yourself winning, imagine yourself lifting this amount of weight, like, as in, are you trying to get them to believe in themselves to that capacity?
Sometimes I think probably the use of visualization, how I would use it, is more so for specific moments and specific movements. So, you know, like a player taking a penalty, or, you know, lifting a certain amount of weight, right? So it has to be realistic in my mind, as opposed to visualizing, let's say, the outcome, the gold medal or whatever it is. I would be more focused on the specific action, and that would be there would be more evidence and research behind the use of visualization for that. At the same time, setting like an outcome goal. So something you want to achieve this year. So I want to come first in such and such a competition. I want to medal in such and such a competition. I mean, that can be really good for motivation as well. You know, it's something to guide your efforts, right? I suppose sometimes the mistake that people make is they set that outcome goal. They see what they want to achieve, but they don't actually set the process goals. So what do I need to do to get there? So what do I need to do on a weekly basis to get there? What are the key milestones along the way that show me that I'm on the way to getting there? So outcome goals are really important, but also your performance goals along the way and your process goals are just as important, if not more important in my eyes. So yes, I would use goals, but I would also use visualization for more specific moments to mentally prepare yourself for those moments.
And I suppose looking at that then, you know, and looking at perfectionism, blessing and a curse. You know what I mean? Because it's great to have that mentality, but if you don't reach where you think you need to go, that can be debilitating for an athlete.
Yeah, it can be difficult. And this is probably more research as me search. I've definitely had perfectionistic tendencies myself. And it can be helpful. Like, again, it's something I come across a lot in the athletes I work with is very high standards themselves, but not just very high standards, excessively high standards, right? And very self-critical of themselves when things don't go to plan. Those would be the two markers of perfectionism, really. So excessively high standards and very self-critical, right? And oftentimes you'll see people who have those things get to a certain level, and the diligence that they show in their training can get them to a certain level, the amount of work they put in. But it can also make it difficult for them to cope with things going badly, right? And there's actually been research done on this, that people with high levels of perfectionism sometimes struggle to cope with things going badly compared to people with lower levels of perfectionism, right? the reason that is because we have, you know, an expectation that things will go so well, but we don't really have a plan in place if they don't go well. And unfortunately in sport, things go badly. Things don't go perfectly. So it might seem not ambitious or kind of conceding that you're not good enough, but to me it's just smart planning, that things are going to go badly and you need to have a plan in place to deal with that, you know. So for me, when I'm working with people, perfectionistic tendencies, I would often help them loosen up those demands a little bit. So you'd often hear statements like, I have to score this goal, or I have to score a certain number of goals, or I cannot miss a tackle. I should not miss a tackle, which on the face of it look like helpful beliefs to have, because it sets really high standards for that person and it makes them try really hard. But it makes it really difficult for them to react when it doesn't go that way, which inevitably will happen. So sometimes it's about changing statements from, you know, I cannot miss a tackle to, you know, I don't want to miss a tackle. It's a subtle but important difference, you know?
It's so interesting because it's like, I was only having this conversation with someone the other day because they were very type A about their training. So, you know, it's like a notebook, long warm-ups, you know, kind of thinking about it a lot. And then I would consider myself a little bit more of I'm a kind of a mixture between a type A and a type B. You know what I mean? I know that if I become too type A, it will set me off kind of OCD wise, and then I'll reach that kind of perfectionism in myself, and then it's game over, because then it's like, I have to do this, and I don't find that helpful to my brain. And then I feel like then you'll overtrain, and then there's, you know, you get injured then. But then I feel like you can be too type B and be too lax with your training. So it's like you really have to find a happy medium where you're not putting too much demand on yourself, but you're still improving, I suppose. You know what I mean? And that's different for every person, every athlete.
Yeah, I think it's about balance really, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and that could be different for one person to another. I think it's important for athletes to reflect on what works for them. You know, like you've clearly reflected yourself on what works for you.
Yes,
You know what I mean? So it's probably different depending on each athlete really, I would say, you know. Yeah.
And so tell us about nerves, because we were chatting about this, and I thought it was so interesting what you were saying in terms of, because I never thought of it like that, like especially for, say, sports like maybe rugby or even weightlifting or any sort of sport where new younger people are coming in, and straight away that could affect their confidence if they're looking at people who are better than them, or, you know, and they're trying to like fit in at the same time as performing, or even just, you know, training one day and then doing a competition another day or a match another day, and how that affects nerves. So how does one deal with that?
Yeah, I suppose first thing I would say is nerves are normal. You know, an amount of nerves is normal coming up to a competition, I would say, in any sport really. Maybe more so in sports where there are long periods of, you know, no competition, something like boxing. You know, you might go months, you're just training, and then all of a sudden you have a competition. Quite common for nerves to come up in a moment like that, but they're also quite common to come up for somebody who's playing every week in a soccer match or GA match or whatever it is, you know. So I think nerves can affect us in lots of different ways. They can affect us just in the build up to the match, point where, you know, there's a lot of worry coming up, thoughts of, geez, I'm going to mess up today, I hope this goes well, if this doesn't go well, God, I'm going to let my whole team down. All these different thoughts, worries can pop up in this time, right? An amount of that is normal, to be honest, right? It can even affect us physically as well, to the point where we're shaking, sweating, vomiting, needing to go to the bathroom. All these different things are signs of nerves, right? An amount of it is normal. And then even on the pitch or on the court, the performance arena, wherever that is, it can affect performance as well sometimes, right? And that would be where I would help people if it's so severe that it's taking away from your performance, or if it's so severe that it's, you know, you're really struggling just to get to the start of the match. That would often be where I would help people, right? So first thing I would say is an amount of nerves is normal. We almost need that amount of nerves. Yeah, you know, so like too little kind of psychological arousal, you're probably lackluster going into competition, right? And you don't feel kind of hyped up enough. Yeah, exactly. Too much, you can be a bit jittery, and you can crack under pressure. You think of like a golfer, if he's holding the club like this and shaking all over the place, you know, they're probably not going to be very good in their putting that day, you know. So you got to find that balance, you know, and that's probably different from one person to another. You know, even if you look at different sports, different positions within sports, one person might feel that they're at their best when they're super calm, composed. One person might feel they're at their best when they're full of energy. Right? So you've got to find what works best for you. This is something I talk to the Dolphin, the rugby team I'm working with, about a lot at the moment, is finding your game face. So what mental state do you need to be in when you start? So, you know, a prop in a rugby team might need to be super aggressive, full of energy. An out half in a rugby team might need to be calm, composed, clear head. So it's different depending on the person, right? What I'm saying is there's a sweet spot. Everybody's got to figure out that sweet spot. I also think with nerves that you've got to interpret them in the right way. So oftentimes when we experience nerves, when we get those physical feelings or those worries or doubts coming up before a competition, there's probably two different ways we can go. One is, oh geez, I'm feeling nervous, this is not good. And that interpretation of it can actually elevate the nerves and then make it affect your performance.
Yeah.
Whereas if you interpret it as nerves are normal, you know, it comes up for everybody, you're going to lessen those nerves slightly and it doesn't affect your performance as much. So those would be two things I'd say about nerves is one, finding out what's your ideal
sweet spot.
Your sweet spot. And the other thing is make sure you're interpreting them in the right way. You know?
And I suppose comparison would probably come in there as well. Like, as you were saying, like everyone deals with nerves differently, and to find your sweet spot and how to deal with that. Do you find a lot with athletes that they're comparing themselves to team players or even just people that they see on social media? Oh, that person, you know, again, I'm just looking at it from a weightlifting perspective. That person weighs the same as me and they're able to lift 20 kg more than me. I mean, what's wrong with me? Why am I not doing that? Do I need to change my training? And then a lot of worry and doubt and I suppose negative self-talk can come into it. Do you see that a lot?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, in team sports and in individual sports. So like individual sports, it could be, you know, a young athlete who's started the sport in the last 2 to 3 years. They're seeing somebody who started at the same time as them and they're progressing faster than they are themselves, you know. So they're looking at the person next to them thinking, geez, I should be there. You know, and that can really get you down, I suppose. And then in team sports, you know, in any given team sports, there's a certain number of spots on the field. So, you know, you're going to look at the other people in your position and compare yourself to them, you know. And in some ways, that could be helpful if it helps you identify what you need to improve on. But oftentimes it can be unhelpful because it just leads to rumination. You're maybe giving out to yourself and you're not doing anything productive about it to change things. So yeah, it would be quite common. And I would say like doubts, worries, fears are normal for any athlete. The best athletes in the world have those things coming up, right? But the best athletes in the world are able to deal with them when they do come up, right? So are you able to acknowledge them, accept that they're there, and then get back to what you're doing in that moment? So for example, a player taking a penalty in a World Cup final, ideally they don't want those doubts and worries coming up, but they might come up, you know, and you have to have a strategy in place to deal with them when they do come up. You have to be able to notice them, acknowledge them, accept them, and then refocus on the job. And that's a skill that could be trained with practice. So yeah, to answer your question, it is quite common to see people comparing themselves to other people. Again, it's normal to a degree, but you have to have a way of dealing with it when it comes up so it doesn't affect
your toolkit. So you have your mental toolkit, so exactly. you know what to do. I wanted to ask you, like, what's your take on, I suppose, worst case scenario, right? So I'm thinking about Simone Biles, you know, in the last few years at the Olympics, and her head was just not in the game, you know. And she, I don't know how privy you are to this, but I just found it so interesting because, you know, it was a team sport, what she was doing at that particular time, and her head wasn't in the game. And I watched her Netflix documentary and I thought it was so interesting because what she's doing in gymnastics is at such a high level and there's so much risk for injury that she was saying to herself, if my head's not in the game, I'm not going to be able to do my job correctly, which means that I'm putting me at risk, I'm putting my team at risk, you know, and she needed to go away and do a lot of work on herself. how important do you think that is for athletes to get to that moment and I suppose not push through to that where they're injuring themselves, putting their teammates at risk? Do you think that's something that like you see a lot of or that we're going to see a lot more of, because people are prioritizing their self more, people are looking after themselves more and thinking more about what they need and want mentally. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that, but I'm wondering, you know, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very difficult thing to do, isn't it? You know, I mean, you've got an athlete at a really high level who's probably got in front of them something that they've been working for years towards, and then they're not capable. You know, physically, it sounds like she was capable. It's not, I haven't read that much about it, to be perfectly honest with you, but physically it sounds like she was capable, but mentally she wasn't in the right place, you know. To be able to step away from that is a very difficult thing to do, and many athletes probably wouldn't. You know, you've got that thing you've been working for right in front of your face, you know, screw it, I'm going to go for it. You know what I mean? Like, and sometimes that's not the right decision, you know what I mean? So very, very difficult thing for her to do. Yeah, what I will say is, like, it's great evidence, I suppose, that to perform at a high level you have to be not just physically fit but mentally fit as well. Yeah,
it just shows the amount of work that goes into it. It's not just that performance you see on the day. It's and I mean, how many athletes do you hear say that or should be saying it? It's not, you know, those 90 minutes you see on that pitch or that routine that you saw for 10 minutes or that person lifting that weight. It's how many hours do they put into the gym? How many years have they been at this? Like, it's just, it's so impressive, you know, the amount of work that goes into things. What sport do you think your face, you're like, where's she going with this?
Go on.
What sport do you think is most taxing mentally?
Most taxing?
Just said I'd throw him a curveball there before we finish up, you know.
I don't know, is this answering your question, but I would say that the sport where the mental side of it is most impactful would probably be golf, of the ones that I've come across. Other sports, maybe you can get away with it a little bit more if you're not mentally capable. But golf, I don't think you can really, you know. I mean, it's so mental because the percentage of the time that you're playing that's taken up with doing the physical task is so little compared to something like hurling, for example, you know, where you're running, you're scanning, you're communicating, you're on the ball, you're tackling, like, the whole time, you know. Golf is very different to that, you know. So you've got so much time to think. You've got so much time in your own head, you know. You hit a shot for a few seconds, you know, lining up the shot, hitting the shot. It, you know, goes well, doesn't go well, whatever happens. Then you've got to think about it until you're walking to the next hole or the next ball, wherever you've hit it to. So there's a lot of time to think, you know. And when I have worked with golfers, I've tried to frame that as an opportunity, really. Yeah. You know, so it can be a challenge that you have all that time to think compared to other sports. You don't. But it's also an opportunity. So you have, you know, 2 minutes to make sure you're in the best possible mental state the next time that your club hits that ball, you know. So actually using that as it's a window of opportunity as opposed to a chance that, I'm gonna think myself out of this. You know what I mean? So yeah, I would say golf, but every sport brings different challenges, psychological challenges with it, I would say. And the level that you're playing at as well makes a big difference, because you've got different pressures. You've got media pressures, you've got fans relying on you, you've got, in team sports, you've got selection pressures. You know, every sport brings, it's probably a bit of a cop-out of the question. Every sport brings different
I think, you're right. But that's very interesting about golf. So are you playing golf yourself now?
Not much. I tried a bit of pitch and putt.
I was like, are you your own case study again when you're talking about golf?
I played with a pitch and putt the odd time with my brother. That's about it. Out in the garden, you know. No, squash would be my main sport now. So yeah, I'd be
paddle. I'm doing a lot of paddle at the moment. Paddle's great crack.
It looks like so much fun. I haven't tried it, but it looks like great crack.
Tim Marron, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. So for those who have listened to your work, want to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
So you can get me through my website on timmarron.ie. I'm on Instagram as well, so if you search Tim Marron Sports Psychology, you'll find me. I think those are the main socials I'm on. So thank you very much as well. Really enjoyed the chat.
Oh, thank you so much. No, I feel way more educated about sports psychology anyway, so thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.